One of the things that CSTC recognised about 18 months ago was that we needed a different way to engage our learners. We were having a great deal of difficulty with employers releasing apprentices and trainees and the willingness to release workers, and CSTC determined amongst the management group that we had to find a new way to do things. We then went along to the board, or I went along to the board, and convinced the board that we needed to come up with a revolutionary way to train, and one of those was to move to an e-learning platform. A great failing in other learning systems that we found with our research was invariably what e-learning platforms do is they either take a textbook and all the print within it, they PDF the documents, they stick the documents on into the e-learning process, and they fail to engage the learner. In fact, all the learner's doing is just reading another book in another environment rather than in their lap. It's now on a computer screen, and they tend not to immerse the learner, they tend not to engage the learner, and that was the one thing that we wanted to avoid with our new learning platform.
If you've got a trainee that's a little bit older, you know, you might have somebody, a trainee doesn't have to be 15, they could be 15, 25, 35, 45. If you've got a guy that's 45 who's been around the traps but doesn't hold a trade qualification, he doesn't necessarily want to come into the classroom and sit down for 8 hours for you to tell him how to communicate. He's learned how to communicate, but it's one of the units of competency that they have to do to get through their qualification. So what better way to do it than at home under your own steam? So after work, sit down, do the unit of competency. You'll fly through it because you've got all that past experience, and get through that unit quite quickly.
A great many e-learning systems are built just for the administrators. In other words, they're to measure or use as a metric at the back end of the learning that the learner does. So again, they're built without the learner as the primary focus, and that was the key for CSTC, that the learner had to be the focus of whatever it was that we were going to do.
You might have a person who it takes a little bit longer to digest certain pieces of information. So once again, doing it online, he can have a small chunk, digest that, maybe answer a couple of quizzes about it, digest the next bit, and so forth and so on. So it really does suit all calibers of personality or persons or trainees who are undertaking units of competency.
So our stance was to engage the learner, to ensure that our training was intuitive for that learner.
Both Terry and Sean have made sure that it is interactive. So it has to be fun to do it. So when you sit down there, some of the topics that we have to do are very dry and boring, and they are just full of words. But the boys have somehow, in their creativeness, made this thing so that it is engaging, it is interactive, and they really can't wait to get through that unit, complete that unit, to get on to the next unit.
We recognise that a great many of our students might not have comprehensive computer skills, notwithstanding that they may well have finished Year 12. It didn't mean for us that they would have good computer skills. So one of the critical things that we recognised was that we had to make that simple. And the ways that we solved that was to have one-click button navigation, bite-sized pieces of information, big buttons, and things that didn't take a lot of computer understanding to engage the learner in the learning process. That they would just simply, by doing things on the screen with those buttons, with the bite-sized information, lots of graphics, lots of photographs, lots of videos, that would help to engage the learner in their theoretical learning.
The other thing that I really like about the online learning, and I'm quite excited about, is I really think it's going to provide very good work ethic for the home. You've got mum or dad who goes to work all day and then comes home, they have a meal as a family together, and then mum or dad go off and do their online learning. So the children can see, well, holy smokes, mum and dad work all day, and now they've got a vision of where they want to be, of what they want to do, but to get there, it's going to be hard work. So I see mum and dad working all day. I see mum and dad now coming to study, for 3 or 4 hours of the night to get to where they want to be. So I really think we're going to be breeding a the next generation of absolute go-getters.
We were fortunate in many respects to be engaged by a French company called Technip. Technip has an $8.7 billion annual turnover. They employ directly about 36,000 workers worldwide, and at least that number again in the subcontract supply chain. What Technip wanted was a way to improve their workplace health and safety, because they were having significant numbers of incidences, indeed deaths, on a regular basis, daily and in fact weekly, and particularly focusing in Southeast Asia. What we were engaged to do was develop a workplace health and safety interactive program for their workers, because some are not based in Kuala Lumpur, they're all over the place, and it was important for those people to get 24/7 access to the learning. And as a consequence of developing that particular program for Technip, we were then able to adapt that back into our domestic market. Now, the consequence of us developing that particular product for Technip was that we received a platinum and a gold award from LearnX Foundation. Now, LearnX is an organisation that recognises e-learning, not only in Australia but in the Asia Pacific and indeed the South Pacific regions. CSTC was really chuffed to be recognised in pretty illustrious company. We were competing against 200 other companies that had applied for various parts of those awards, and I think the really wonderful thing that came out of that our own Terry Brown was invited down to present at the national conference in Melbourne, just how we went about developing that learning product for Technip, and then what we were intending to do with it in its adaptation for the Australian domestic marketplace to improve workplace health and safety.
CSTC will never give up practical training, because you need to learn from the best. You may be engaged with an employer. The employer might be 105. So his techniques of doing something is old school. So we need to be always one step ahead. So we will never ever not do practical training here. It's so important not only to provide the underpinning knowledge, but you also have to give the skill. And the skill has to be given in the manner in which it has to be taught. I mean, there's a certain way to do something, and there's a shortcut way to do something. So we need to teach the way that it has to be done to make sure that we follow the rules of the unit.